Imagine a frozen lake in New Hampshire, an old musician playing his heart out to empty rooms and fading memories, and a wild bobcat slipping through the snow, drawn by the lonely glow of music in the dark. This isn't a story about applause or fairy tale endings. It's about the ache that comes with remembering, the courage it takes to reach out in winter's darkest hours, and the surprising ways hope sometimes finds us, even when it feels like no one's out there listening. If this story stays with you, I'd love to hear why. Share your thoughts in the comments, and please hit subscribe if you'd like to help me bring more true stories of connection, healing, and wild, stubborn hope to the world. Let's listen together and see what echoes back from the quiet. Deep winter in New Hampshire has a way of swallowing sound. Snow piles up against the window panes, thick and silent, and the lake outside freezes so solid even the trees seem to huddle for warmth. That's where Theo Alcott lives, an old wooden cabin set back from the road, half hidden by pine and birch, the kind of place people forget is there until spring's thaw. It's been years since Theo's heard the sound of another human voice in his home. Years since the laughter of dinner parties or the careful hush before a performance filled the air. Now, the only thing that breaks the hush is his own music. He's 74 and smaller than he used to be. His back a little bent, his hair gone to the color of the frost on his window. The piano dominates the little living room, black and glossy but covered in a fine layer of dust. Around it, the walls are a history in black and white. Photos from concert halls and smoky clubs, a younger man with a sharper jaw, always in a suit, always beside a woman whose smile lingers even after the photograph has faded. That's Evelyn. She's gone now, but Theo keeps her picture on the wall, tucked among the others, her face turned just so as if she's still listening. Most nights, Theo lights a fire and sits at the piano, letting his fingers move over the keys. No applause, no audience. Just the sound, soft, wandering, sometimes halting, drifting through the room. Some evenings he wonders if he's playing to keep the cold at bay, or if he's just proving to himself that he's still alive. There are days the arthritis in his hands bites so sharply he almost gives in to the silence. But music is a habit, like breathing, and in the hush of the cabin, every note feels heavier, as if it might be the last. Tonight is colder than most. Wind rattles the door, making the old wood groan, and the sky is the color of slate. Theo doesn't mind. If anything, he likes the way winter keeps the world at arm's length. He sits at the piano, the keys smooth and cold under his fingertips, and begins to play Debussy, a piece he used to save for nights when Evelyn couldn't sleep. The notes are gentle, searching, the sound swelling and receding like the tide. For a moment, he forgets how empty the house has become. But then, halfway through the piece, a sharp crack splits the quiet, a sound out of place, abrupt, violent against the hush. Theo's hands freeze above the keys. For a few heartbeats, he just listens. The wind, the creak of settling timbers, his own breath. He stands, careful not to make a sound, and goes to the window. Outside, the world is white and still. Nothing moves on the porch. The trees cast long shadows across the snow, black lines drawn by a careful hand. He waits, squinting into the dark, half expecting to see something, a stray branch, maybe, or the fox that sometimes circles the trash. But there's nothing, just silence thick enough to choke on. Theo turns back to the piano, unsettled, and finishes the piece. The notes seem thinner, like a thread unspooling into nothing. When he's done, he closes the lid and sits there, staring at his hands, wrinkled, veined, stubborn. The fire crackles, but the room feels colder than before. He tries to sleep, but the crack stays with him, a wedge of sound in the middle of the night. At dawn, he rises early, stiff and sore, and pulls on his boots to step outside. The air bites his cheeks, sharp and clean, and his breath hangs in front of him. There, in the blue-gray light, he sees them. Fresh tracks crossing the snow right up to his porch. Not fox, not raccoon. These are larger, round, the pads clear as coins pressed into the white. Bobcat. He's certain of it. The thought sends a shiver through him, but not of fear, more a kind of curiosity, the same feeling he used to get before stepping on stage. He kneels, studying the prints, and follows them a few steps to where they vanish under the porch. Somewhere out there, a wild thing has crossed into his world. Drawn by what? The warmth of the house, the faint smell of food. Or maybe, just maybe, the music. Standing in the silent yard, Theo feels a flicker of something he hasn't let himself hope for in a long time. The sense that, even at the end of the world, there might still be someone, or something, left to listen. He glances back at the window, where his reflection blurs against the glass. For a moment, he imagines Evelyn's face beside his, smiling that quiet, knowing smile. Would she have laughed at the idea? A pianist and a bobcat sharing the dark? He almost laughs himself, but the sound catches in his throat, and all that comes out is a long, tired sigh. Back inside, the piano waits, silent and expectant. Theo sits, cracks his knuckles, and places his hands on the keys. He doesn't know what the day will bring. Maybe nothing. Maybe more tracks in the snow, or maybe just another night of music for an empty room. But tonight, for the first time in years, the silence feels thinner, less like a wall, more like a curtain, waiting to be drawn aside. And somewhere beyond the glass, in the cold white woods, the story has already begun. Winter nights in New Hampshire have their own logic. The world outside Theo's cabin turns to shadow, every sound sharpened against the hush. By 8, the last smudge of daylight is gone, and the lake is nothing but a cold absence beneath the ice, the trees silent as sentinels. Inside, the only light comes from a single lamp near the piano. Theo sits hunched, shoulders wrapped in an old wool blanket, eyes lingering on the keys as if searching for a reason to begin. On the wall, the photo of Evelyn glows softly in the lamplight, her smile stubbornly refusing to fade. He starts with something simple, an old standard he played in smoke-filled bars, back when music meant paying the bills. The notes fall into the hush, one after another, not for anyone in particular, just to fill the space. Sometimes, Theo wonders if that's all life really is, finding a way to keep the silence at bay, one note at a time. Tonight, though, there's a tension in the air, a feeling he can't quite name, as if the house itself is holding its breath. Theo pauses between pieces, listening to the crackle of the fire, the creak of the timbers, the ancient groan of the wind clawing at the eaves. Every noise seems magnified, every shadow deeper. It's the sort of night that makes you remember all the things you've lost. Halfway through a Debussy nocturne, something changes. Not the music, but the world outside. The wind rises and then, cutting through it, a sound like splitting wood, sharp, quick, violent. It echoes through the bones of the house, makes Theo's hands falter on the keys. He stops, listens. Nothing. Only the wind. For a long moment, he sits, frozen. A memory flickers, Evelyn once, startled awake by a storm, clutching his hand as if he could hold the night at bay. He misses that, the certainty of being needed. The sound comes again, this time softer, a scuffle or a scrape on the porch. Not a branch, not the wind. Theo stands, pulling the blanket tighter around his shoulders. He moves to the window and peers out, careful not to let the lamplight betray him. The porch is empty, the snow untouched except for a few old drifts pushed up against the railing. Still, the feeling persists. A prickle at the base of his neck, a sense that he is not alone. He waits, watches the line of trees, the edge of the lake, the black stillness pressing in. Nothing moves. Minutes pass. The fire sinks low, and the cold seeps back in around the edges. Eventually, Theo gives up, shakes his head, and returns to the piano. The keys feel colder than before, and his hands are stiff. He tries to find his way back into the music, but something has changed. The night has shifted, and the notes no longer comfort. They haunt, echoing back at him like questions he can't answer. At midnight, Theo finally gives in. He closes the piano, snuffs the lamp, and climbs the narrow stairs to his bedroom. Sleep is thin, fitful, full of images that don't quite coalesce. Yellow eyes in the dark, the sharp snap of something breaking, Evelyn's voice calling his name from across an empty stage. He wakes before dawn, heart pounding, the sense of unease still with him. The house is silent, the kind of deep silence that only comes at the edge of winter. For a long time he just sits on the edge of his bed, staring at his hands. Hands that once thrilled audiences, hands that now tremble in the quiet. By morning, gray light spills across the frozen lake. Theo dresses slowly, pulling on his thickest coat and boots. He steps outside, boots crunching over the packed snow. The air is knife cold, sharp enough to make his eyes water. At first, everything seems as it should be. White, still, untouched. But as he turns to head back inside, he sees them. Tracks, fresh bobcat prints, unmistakable, cutting across the snow right up to his porch. Not the meandering path of a stray cat or raccoon. These are purposeful, broad, heavy, the claws just visible in the softest spots. They circle the porch, doubling back, pausing right at the door. Theo crouches, tracing a gloved finger along one of the prints. He hasn't seen a bobcat in years. Not this close. He remembers stories from neighbors about chickens snatched in the night. But he's never worried much. His world is too small for worry, too empty for fear. But now, kneeling in the pale morning light, he feels something else, a kind of kinship. Another creature drawn by the promise of warmth, or maybe just the sound of a piano drifting through the night. Why here, he wonders. What did it want? Was it the music, or simply the sense of life in a house that has stood so long in silence? He follows the tracks a few yards out, stopping at the edge of the woods where the snow is deepest. The prints vanish beneath a thicket of dead branches and brambles. The air is full of the faint scent of pine, the distant echo of birdsong, and something else. A quiet so profound, it feels sacred. For a moment, Theo just stands there, eyes closed, listening to the hush. The cold stings his cheeks, and his breath rises in clouds. He thinks of Evelyn, of all the nights he played just for her, the way she used to say the world felt wider when the music filled the house. Back inside, Theo makes coffee, sits by the window, and stares at the prints. He thinks of the bobcat, wild, silent, unknowable, and the strange comfort in knowing he is not the only creature searching for something in the dark. That night, as the sun slips away behind the trees, he sits at the piano once more. This time, he leaves the lamp off, He plays for the darkness, for the hush, for whatever wild thing might be listening outside his door. And in that quiet, as the music weaves through the shadows, Theo feels the first stirrings of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the silence isn't empty after all. The days grow colder, and the snow deepens around Theo's cabin, muting the world to a hush so deep it presses against the windows like a living thing. Inside, the air is thick with the faint scent of pine from the crackling fire, the musty comfort of old books, and the lingering memory of perfume on a scarf long untouched. Winter has a way of shrinking the world, closing it in around you, so all that remains are your own footsteps, your own breath, and the thoughts that circle endlessly through the quiet. For Theo, time moves strangely now, each morning blending into the next, each evening stretching thin and pale. He falls into a rhythm, wake with the gray light, nurse a mug of coffee while watching the woods, shuffle through the day's chores with an absent mind, then wait for darkness to settle in so he can sit again at the piano. It's a kind of ritual, a small defiance against the emptiness. But tonight, something feels different. Maybe it's the way the wind has died down, leaving the night preternaturally still. Or maybe it's the memory of those tracks, so purposeful, so present, reminding him that he is not quite as alone as he thought. He begins with Chopin, letting the melody curl softly through the room, each note measured, delicate, tentative. There's no one to hear, and yet he feels himself playing more carefully, as if the air itself is listening. Shadows dance on the ceiling as the fire flickers low. The only sound is the music and the small, involuntary sighs that escape from deep within him. He pauses, listening. For a moment, there's nothing, just the slow settling of the cabin. Then, faint but unmistakable, a gentle scratching at the door. He stops playing, hands hovering over the keys. His heart thuds in his chest. Not out of fear, but out of an old, half-forgotten excitement. The feeling of waiting for someone to enter, someone who matters. He sits motionless, holding his breath. The scratching comes again, then stops. In the silence that follows, he hears his own pulse, feels the ache in his bones, the yearning for connection that never quite goes away. Slowly he rises, crossing to the window that looks out onto the porch. At first he sees only his own reflection, drawn and pale in the glass. But then, as his eyes adjust to the darkness, he sees them. Two yellow eyes, shining from the edge of the steps, motionless and steady. A bobcat, silent as snowfall, sits there, its fur dusted with frost, its body lean and taut, a study in patience. It does not seem afraid. It does not seem hungry, not exactly. It simply waits, as if it too is searching for something. Theo doesn't move. He barely breathes. For long minutes, man and animal simply regard each other through the glass. Two creatures drawn together by a need neither can name. What does it want? Food? Shelter? Or is it impossibly the music? A thought rises, unbidden. Maybe it's lonely too. Theo almost laughs at himself, an old man imagining kinship with a wild thing. But there is something in the bobcat's stillness, something that feels almost reverent, as if it is waiting for him to begin again. He returns to the piano, moving slowly, so as not to break the moment. He sets his fingers on the keys and starts Clair de Lune. The melody is familiar, but tonight it feels transformed, every note heavier, sweeter, more fragile. He plays not for an audience, not for Evelyn, not for himself, but for the wildness listening outside. As the last note fades, Theo looks up. The yellow eyes are still there, unblinking. The bobcat does not move, but something in its posture has shifted. It sits a little closer, as if drawn by the music. A memory comes, sharp and sudden. The first time Evelyn heard him play. He'd been 19, awkward and hungry, desperate for approval. She'd listened with her eyes closed, and when he finished, she'd said, "You play like the world is ending." He hadn't known what she meant then, but he thinks he does now. Playing in the silence for no one but himself and a wild animal, he feels the edge of something. Grief and hope twisted together, inseparable. He finishes the piece and lets his hands fall to his lap, the fire gutters sending a wave of orange light across the room. The bobcat sits perfectly still, a shadow within the shadows, watching. Why does it come? What does it hear? Theo's heart aches with questions he cannot ask. He thinks of all the years he played for crowds, shining halls, eager faces, applause like rain. None of that seems real now. Here, in the hush of the woods, his only audience is a creature who offers no judgment, no praise, only presence. He wonders, not for the first time, whether anyone is ever truly alone, whether the act of creating, music, art, kindness, is ever wasted, even if there's no one there to bear witness. Later, as the embers die and the room fades to blue, the bobcat slips away, leaving only the memory of its gaze and the faintest imprint of paws in the snow. Theo sits at the piano, hands resting on the keys, and for the first time in decades he feels seen, not by the past, not by ghosts, but by something alive and mysterious. He lets the feeling settle, soft and unfamiliar. Outside, the wind rises again, carrying the song of the night into the dark, silent woods, and somewhere, just beyond the reach of lamplight, a wild thing listens and waits. Winter nights, once oppressive, now carry a peculiar anticipation. Theo finds himself watching the darkness, listening for the soft click of claws against wood, the subtle hush of something alive moving just beyond the edge of his world. He has stopped expecting the past to return. Instead, he waits for something new, something wild, to answer his music. On the third evening after the first encounter, the bobcat appears again, silent as breath, yellow eyes shining just outside the glass, fur blending into the shadows that collect at the base of the porch. This time, Theo doesn't hesitate. He sits at the piano, the cold keys beneath his fingers like old friends, and wonders what to play. He chooses Bach. The music is mathematical, precise, a scaffolding of logic built to hold back chaos. He begins with a prelude, the notes quick and exact, his hands remembering even when his mind drifts. The sound fills the room, clear and sharp, but outside, the bobcat shifts, restless, and then disappears into the black. Theo keeps playing, but already the moment feels empty. There's a strange sadness in the sudden quiet. When the piece ends, he closes the piano, shuffles to the window, and looks out into the dark. The tracks in the snow are fresh, and for a moment, he wonders if he's made a mistake. Music, after all, is not only for showing skill, but for sharing something softer, something true. The next night, he tries Chopin. The notes are gentler, spiraling upward, hopeful, even a little wounded. Midway through, he glimpses movement at the edge of the porch, a flick of a tail, the brief shimmer of golden eyes in the lamplight. The bobcat is back, cautious but curious. It settles on the first step, paws tucked beneath its chest, ears swiveling toward the music. Theo plays on, softer, every phrase drawn out as if each note is a secret, meant only for the two of them. When the final chord fades, the bobcat lingers, then slips away without a sound. A strange warmth settles over Theo, both joy and ache. He tries again the next evening. This time, something different. Something he's not played in decades. A waltz he wrote for Evelyn the summer after they married, back when love made the world seem lighter and music felt like flight. His hands are less certain, the melody slower than he remembers, but the feeling is there, blooming quietly in the dark. He leaves the window open just a crack, letting the melody float into the frozen woods. The bobcat appears as if summoned, drawn closer than before. It sits just outside, body relaxed, listening with the focus of a true audience. In that moment, the world seems to contract. Just an old man, a wild animal, and a song composed long ago for someone who loved him. He finishes the waltz, the last notes trembling in the cold air, and for a heartbeat, he feels Evelyn's presence, soft as the memory of her laughter, sharp as the ache of her absence. He wonders if the bobcat senses it too, if the music carries something more than memory, something even the wild can recognize. Love that refuses to fade, loss that refuses to leave. The cat remains a while, head tilted, almost contemplative. Theo says nothing. He has learned that words are not the currency here. Instead, he lets the silence swell, filling the room with the echoes of what's been played, what's been felt, and what still waits, just out of reach. After a while, the bobcat stands, stretches, and moves into the woods. Its shape dissolves into the trees, but the feeling lingers, a resonance deep in Theo's chest. Night after night, the pattern repeats. Theo at the piano, the bobcat at the steps, music drifting through the dark like a thread tying one silent soul to another. He never names the animal, never tempts it with food. Their connection isn't built on need or barter, but something stranger, a recognition maybe, or the simple comfort of not being entirely alone. He finds himself caring less about the roughness in his hands, the mistakes that slip into his playing. It's not about perfection anymore. Each note is an offering, not just to the wild thing outside, but to the memory of who he was, who he still wants to be. One evening, as snow begins to fall, Theo loses himself in the music. The bobcat comes closer, almost to the door, its breath steaming in the porch light. They are separated by nothing but a thin pane of glass, and for a moment, Theo wishes he could open it. Let the cold and the wild in. Let the boundaries between worlds dissolve. But the cat stays outside, and Theo stays in. That's the way of things. Some distances can't be crossed, no matter how sweet the music. He wonders, have you ever felt this? The ache of connection just out of reach? The hope that someone, even a stranger, is listening to the story you can't speak? That night, as the fire dies and the cabin cools, Theo lingers at the piano, fingers resting on the keys, not quite ready to break the spell. Outside, the bobcat vanishes into the white hush, leaving only prints in the snow and the memory of golden eyes at the threshold. In the hush that follows, Theo hears something new, not applause, not words, but the steady rhythm of his own heart, joined, if only for a moment, by another. Two lives, woven together by a song, sharing the darkness and the light, each in their own way. As winter deepens, the world around Theo narrows further, a hush so complete it feels almost sacred. The cold presses in on all sides, and even the smallest sound seems to linger in the air, hanging above the snow like a question waiting for an answer. Days pass in a rhythm dictated by light and shadow, by firewood and coffee, by the slow procession of dusk toward midnight. But now, there is something else. A silent ritual that roots itself in his days and gives new shape to his nights. Every evening, as darkness thickens at the window, Theo sits at the piano and waits. Sometimes he begins to play even before he sees the flicker of movement outside, trusting that the music will find its audience. Other nights, he spots those yellow eyes first, just at the edge of the porch, gleaming with a kind of patient intelligence, and only then does he let his fingers touch the keys. The Bobcat always comes, never early, never late, always silent, always watching. Theo doesn't name it. He doesn't try to coax it closer, doesn't offer scraps, or try to tempt it with warmth. He knows, somehow, that this is not a pet and never will be. This is a visitor from another world, one that owes him nothing and takes nothing except the music. Their relationship is built on quiet and respect, on the careful maintenance of distance and the shared act of listening. He opens the window a crack, even when the wind howls and the cold bites at his knuckles. He wants the music to spill out, to touch the snow, to become part of the night itself. The sound threads through the darkness, fragile but unbroken. Sometimes he wonders if there are others listening, owls in the trees, foxes beneath the porch, Evelyn's spirit somewhere just beyond sight. Night after night, the Bobcat returns. Its presence is a comfort, and its silence is a kind of answer. Theo finds that he plays better now, more honestly. He stops worrying about missed notes or trembling fingers. He stops performing. Instead, he simply offers what he has, his sorrow, his hope, his memory, woven through each piece. It's strange, but he feels more alive than he has in years. There is a meaning here, elusive but real. The wild thing outside needs nothing from him but music, and in return, it gives him the most precious thing of all, the feeling that he matters, if only for the span of a song. One evening, the fire crackling low, Theo finishes a piece and looks up. The Bobcat is there, nearer than ever, its breath steaming in the cold air. The house is utterly silent except for the ticking of an old clock and the faint hum of the world turning. For the first time, Theo speaks, not loudly, but just enough to bridge the gap. "You hear me, don't you?" His voice is rough with disuse, startling in the quiet. The Bobcat blinks, tail flicking, but does not run. Its ears tilt forward, as if trying to catch the meaning behind the words. Theo feels foolish, suddenly, but also bold. He thinks of how often he played to crowded rooms, searching every face for approval or understanding, and how little any of that matters now. Out here, applause would only shatter the moment. He keeps playing, sometimes Bach, sometimes Chopin, sometimes a piece of his own invention. Half-remembered melodies that seem to well up from the very wood of the piano. The Bobcat listens, sometimes lying down, sometimes shifting restlessly, but never leaving before the last note fades. In its patience, Theo finds an echo of something he's always craved: acceptance, uncomplicated and wordless. He starts to notice small changes in himself. He hums as he makes coffee in the morning, finds pleasure in the way sunlight catches dust motes in the air. He remembers stories from his childhood, old jokes he hasn't thought of in years. It's as if the music has called some lost part of himself back from wherever it's been hiding. One night, after a particularly gentle waltz, Theo sits in the growing dark, the window open, the cold settling around him like an old friend. The Bobcat is still on the porch, tail curled neatly around its paws, watching him with a look so steady it borders on tender. In that hush, Theo feels the weight of the years lift, if only a little. He finds himself talking again, not about big things, no confessions, no demands, just small memories. A story about Evelyn's favorite dress, the way rain used to sound on the cabin roof, the taste of wild strawberries in the summer. The bobcat does not judge, does not interrupt, just listens. Its presence is a quiet affirmation that sometimes the act of sharing, however simple, can be enough. If you've ever felt that, even for a moment, that someone or something was listening without judgment, holding space for your sorrow and your joy, then maybe you'll understand what Theo has found. In the end, it isn't the applause or the adoration that matters, but the knowledge that you are not invisible, not unheard. On the coldest nights, when the wind shrieks and the windows rattle, Theo plays anyway, the music rising above the storm, a fragile thread binding two lives across the glass. And every time the bobcat appears, every time it lingers until the last note, Theo feels a small, stubborn hope take root in his chest. A hope that the silence is not empty, after all, but full of meaning for those willing to listen. Some rituals are born out of habit. Others are gestures of longing, attempts to reach for something already lost. As the days pass, Theo's evenings at the piano gain new gravity. His audience may be silent, but the music grows richer, layered with memory and the ache of unfinished conversations. One evening, as dusk crawls quietly across the lake and the fire sends shadows leaping along the cabin's walls, Theo finds himself staring at an old photograph, one he's avoided for years. Evelyn, her laughter frozen, hair loose around her shoulders, eyes bright with some secret joy, smiles from the faded silver frame. She'd always insisted on being present for every performance, no matter how small or how late. Even when the crowd was thin, she would sit close, hands folded in her lap, her gaze never straying from the stage. It occurs to Theo, suddenly and without warning, that he's never played for her in this cabin. Not truly. Not as he is now, older and smaller, his heart stitched together by years of silence and loss. The realization settles in his chest with a quiet heaviness, and for the first time since her death, he wants her there. If only for a moment, if only in spirit. He carries the photograph to the piano, setting it on the faded mahogany surface with care. The bobcat is not yet here. The night is still soft, dusk bleeding into blue. He hesitates, fingers poised above the keys, unsure if this small act is a form of tribute or surrender. The room feels different with Evelyn's photo in place, less like a retreat from the world, more like a stage, even if the audience is only a wild animal and a memory. Theo draws a slow breath, his hands trembling, and begins with a gentle prelude. The melody unfolds, tentative at first, then stronger, richer. He imagines Evelyn listening, her presence woven through every note. As the music drifts out the half-open window, the bobcat emerges from the gloom, as silent as falling snow. Tonight, it sits closer, paws pressed neatly together, its gaze unwavering, not just on Theo, but on the photograph atop the piano. The animal's head tilts, and for a fleeting second, Theo feels something pass between them, a current of understanding, fragile as the light. He wonders, almost aloud, does the bobcat sense her? Does it know that it's not only him who needs the comfort of connection, but the memory of a love that refuses to fade? Outside, the snow begins to fall, slow, heavy flakes that gather on the porch railing, softening the hard lines of the world. The bobcat blinks, almost contemplative, as if feeling the shift in the air. For the first time, Theo feels as if the cabin is truly full, of music, of memory, of witness. He plays on, the pieces chosen not by habit, but by instinct. Debussy for the moments of longing, Chopin for the hope threaded through sorrow, and his own waltz, fragile, imperfect, for the aching need to speak to someone who is gone. When he pauses, the silence that follows is not empty, but alive. The Bobcat's golden eyes shift from the photograph to Theo, then back again, as if it can sense the invisible lines that connect all three: a man, his lost love, and the wild thing that has become both audience and confidant. Theo is reminded of the old stories his grandmother used to tell, of animals as messengers, as companions to the lonely. He'd always dismissed them as fables, but now, with the Bobcat steady and unafraid, he finds himself wishing the tales were true. He wants to believe, just for tonight, that Evelyn hears the music through this unlikely witness. He speaks softly, voice barely more than a murmur. "You see her too, don't you?" The Bobcat does not flinch, does not flee. The cabin, for once, is utterly still. For the first time in decades, Theo feels the urge to speak openly, to admit his regrets, to confess the things he never found words for when Evelyn was alive. He tells the room, the Bobcat, the photo, how he misses the warmth of her hand, the sound of her laughter on rain-soaked afternoons, the way she filled the smallest spaces with light. The Bobcat listens, ears swiveling at each shift in his tone. It is a peculiar thing to pour out your heart to a creature who will never answer. And yet, Theo feels heard. The cabin, full of shadow and snow-muffled sound, holds space for every word. Outside, the storm thickens, wind keening through the trees. The fire pops, the photograph glints in the shifting light. And for a moment, Theo imagines he hears Evelyn's voice. Just a whisper, just a memory, woven through the melody. The music carries on, softer now, a lullaby for all that was and all that remains. The Bobcat stays until the last note fades, its gaze lingering not on the musician, but on the space between the living and the remembered. When it finally disappears into the night, Theo does not feel abandoned. Instead, he feels anchored, held by the weight of memory, of witness, of the knowledge that love once given never truly leaves. Even when all that's left is a photograph, a song, and the silent regard of a wild companion. And as the cabin settles back into stillness, Theo realizes the most profound connections are often forged in silence, in the listening that holds without asking, in the gaze that says, "You are not alone." Winter, for all its quiet beauty, can turn savage in a heartbeat. The week begins gentle enough, snow falling in soft, lazy spirals, smoke curling from the chimney, Theo's world shrinking further to the glow of firelight and the promise of evening music. But New Hampshire knows how to change its mind, and by Thursday, the forecast whispers warnings. Blizzard coming, winds from the north, temperatures dropping like the last light before midnight. Theo prepares as best he can. He chops extra wood, stacks it high near the hearth, and checks the generator, recalling other storms, other nights huddled close with Evelyn, laughter battling the howl of the wind. But now alone, the work feels heavier. Each log split, each window latched, a reminder of how much smaller life becomes with each passing year. That night, as the storm gathers its breath, Theo sits at the piano. The cabin shudders in the first assault of wind, and snow rattles the glass with a kind of desperate urgency. The world outside vanishes. No lake, no woods, just a wall of white and the roar of something ancient trying to break through. Theo plays anyway. He tells himself it's to hold back fear, to keep the rhythm of his nights. But beneath that, there's another truth. He's playing for the Bobcat. It has become his measure of the days, his proof that connection is possible even here, at the edge of the world. He wonders, as he plays Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, whether the animal will come, or if the wild has claimed it for its own. But the night wears on, and the porch remains empty. The music feels brittle, sharp. Each note is a question, tossed into the storm and swallowed by the wind. The fire flares, shadows pulse across the walls, and Theo's hands tremble. Not just from age, but from something colder. Dread, grief, the memory of every goodbye he never saw coming. He finishes the sonata with a kind of desperation, as if playing louder, playing better, could summon the presence he needs. But the house stays hollow, the silence heavy. When he closes the piano, the loss is almost physical, a weight pressing in on his chest. For the first time in weeks, Theo feels utterly alone. He sits by the fire, Evelyn's photograph catching the flicker of light, the bobcat's absence loud as thunder. Outside, the blizzard rages. The wind screams against the roof. He thinks of the animal, small against that fury, how its tracks crossed the snow so bravely, how its yellow eyes never blinked in the cold. Where do wild things go in storms like this? What comfort do they find? Theo tries to sleep, but the hours twist by. He dreams of searching the woods, of finding paw prints buried beneath drifts, of calling out and hearing only his own voice thrown back by the wind. He wakes with a start, heart racing, the storm still howling outside. The cold feels deeper now, sinking into his bones. When morning finally comes, gray and exhausted, Theo dresses in layers, pulls on his thickest boots, and steps into the blinding white. The world is unrecognizable. Snow has drifted high against the porch. The lake, the trees, even the old path to the mailbox, all erased, smoothed to nothing by the night's relentless hunger. He calls out, voice barely more than a whisper, "Hey, you out there?" It's foolish, he knows, but hope is stubborn, a seed that survives in the harshest ground. There's no answer, no sign. He checks the porch for tracks, finds only his own boot prints from the night before, already filling with snow. He waits, scanning the tree line, searching for any hint of movement. But the woods keep their secrets. Inside, the day drags on. Theo tends the fire, lets the piano sit silent, and watches the storm's tail unravel from the windows. He tells himself the bobcat is safe, that wild things know how to ride out the worst of it. But doubt creeps in, quiet and persistent. By dusk, exhaustion has settled in his bones, but Theo can't bring himself to play. The keys feel alien beneath his hands, the silence between notes wider than ever. He wonders if he's lost something precious, a connection that was never his to keep, a fragile thread severed by a night of wind and cold. He finds himself at the window, Evelyn's photo in hand, scanning the endless white. For a moment, he thinks he sees movement, a flash of shadow, the suggestion of golden eyes. But when he blinks, it's gone. Just another ghost woven into the snow. Night comes again, softer now, the storm finally spent. The house is quiet, the fire burning low. Theo sits by the window, photo in his lap, and lets the sadness wash over him. Not the sharp pain of fresh loss, but the dull ache of absence. The knowledge that some things, once gone, may never return. Yet even in that hollow space, a stubborn ember remains. He recalls a phrase Evelyn used to say on nights like this, when the world felt too big and too empty to bear. Nothing ever really disappears, Theo. It just changes shape. He holds on to that, repeating it in the silence, willing himself to believe. And somewhere out there, beyond the reach of light, the snow settles, covering everything but the hope that refuses to die. The storm recedes the way sorrow does, slowly, leaving behind a silence more profound than any before it. Theo wakes before dawn, the air inside the cabin sharp with cold, the fire a memory of warmth in the ashen grate. He lies in bed a long time, listening. The wind is gone. In its place, an uneasy hush, like the world is holding its breath. When he finally rises, his body aches from too many hours curled in a chair, waiting for a sound that never came. The absence of the bobcat gnaws at him in ways he can't name. He pulls on his thickest coat, the buttons stiff from years of use, and steps outside as the first blush of light touches the horizon. The world is changed. Snow covers everything, a blank, unbroken canvas stretching from the porch to the lake and beyond. Branches are bent low under the weight. The old willow by the water transformed into a sculpture of ice and shadow. Theo's boots crunch softly, each step a small act of defiance against the emptiness. He stands on the porch for a long moment, letting the cold bite his cheeks, scanning for any sign of movement. He calls out, soft, tentative, a simple, "Hey," that floats and vanishes in the quiet. His voice sounds unfamiliar, almost childlike. At first, he sees nothing. Then, at the edge of the porch, something interrupts the white perfection. A single drop of red. Small, stark, impossibly bright against the snow. Theo kneels, heart pounding. The blood is fresh, already beginning to freeze. He follows it, one careful step at a time, across the yard, past the old stone bench, down toward the lake. The trail weaves through the willow's shadow. A few more drops, then a spray, then a smear where something heavy has dragged itself through the drifts. There, beneath the lowest branches, half hidden and curled in on itself, lies the bobcat. For a moment, Theo thinks it's dead. The animal's sides move so slowly he's not sure it's breathing at all. Frost clings to its whiskers, blood matting the fur along one flank, the wound raw and ugly against the purity of the snow. Its eyes are closed, its body shivering with each ragged breath. Theo's mind empties of everything but the ache of helplessness. He kneels beside the animal, not daring to touch it, not daring to move. What can I do? The question hangs there, heavy as the winter sky. He thinks of calling for help, but the nearest neighbor is miles away, the roads likely impassable. Besides, what could anyone do? This is the wild, and the wild writes its own rules. So he does the only thing he knows. He goes back to the cabin, dragging his electric keyboard by its worn handle, its cord trailing behind him like a lifeline. He props it up on the snowbank a few feet from the bobcat, sits on a half-buried log, and lets his fingers find a melody. Soft, slow, nothing grand or heroic. Just music offered gently into the freezing dawn. At first the bobcat doesn't stir, but as the song drifts through the trees, the animal's ears twitch. Its eyes flutter open, slits of gold peering at him through a haze of pain. It does not run. It does not snarl. It simply listens. Theo plays on, letting the music do what words cannot: offer comfort, bear witness, fill the void between two beings at the edge of what can be endured. Each note is a prayer, each phrase a promise. You're not alone. Not now. Not ever. He finds himself talking softly, not expecting an answer. You've come so far, haven't you? Just like the rest of us. Just trying to make it through the storm. The bobcat blinks, shivers, settles its head on its paws. For a long time, they remain like that. Man and animal wrapped in the hush of dawn, joined by pain and the hope that music, at least, can lessen it. Eventually, the cold drives Theo back inside. He brews coffee, stands at the window, watching the willow, the unmoving shape beneath it. Fear gnaws at him, fear of loss, of failure, of the silence returning for good. But also, in the quiet, a strange peace. He's done what he can, offered what he has. The hours crawl by. Theo checks on the bobcat as often as he dares, playing for it in short bursts, coaxing warmth and life into the day. He wishes he could do more, staunch the wound, carry the creature inside, fight back the wild's indifference with blankets and tea and gentle hands. But this is not a story of rescue, not in the way he once imagined. This is a story of presence, of choosing to sit with pain, to offer what comfort you can, even if it cannot change the outcome. As the sun climbs, the bobcat raises its head, eyes meeting Theo's across the distance. There is something fierce in its gaze, pride maybe, or gratitude, or simply the wild acceptance that comes when you know you are being seen. Theo sits, breath clouding in the air, the keyboard humming beneath his hands. The melody is quiet, unfinished. He doesn't know how the song will end. He only knows that, in this moment, neither he nor the bobcat is truly alone. Have you ever found yourself at the edge of what you can bear and discovered a strange kind of beauty there? A gentleness in the act of witnessing, in staying, in refusing to turn away. As dusk approaches, the snow glows blue, and the world holds its breath once more. The wild is never tamed, never safe. But tonight, for one fragile hour, suffering and comfort share the same patch of earth. And as Theo packs up the keyboard and trudges back toward the golden light of his cabin, he carries with him the music of the morning. A song of blood and cold, and the stubborn hope that even the deepest wounds can be touched by a kindness that asks nothing in return. The day after the blizzard dawns impossibly clear. It's the kind of cold that makes every sound ring sharper, the kind that feels almost holy. The snow, churned by wind and wildness, now lies smooth and luminous, bearing silent witness to what's been lost and what still endures. Inside the cabin, Theo's joints ache and his hands move slower than he'd like, but there's a sense of purpose that carries him forward. Something is unfinished. Something calls for closure. The bobcat remains beneath the willow, hidden in the hush, its golden eyes flickering open each time Theo approaches. The wound is grave, yet the wild thing does not shrink from him, nor does it beg for mercy. Instead, it waits, just as Theo has spent so many nights waiting at the piano for the answer that never quite arrived. There's a wordless understanding now. Neither of them is here to be saved, only to be seen, to be held in a moment's shared existence. Back inside, Theo sits at his piano. Sunlight strikes Evelyn's photograph, sending a pale halo across the keys. The cabin feels different, less a place of exile, more a kind of sanctuary. There is no audience, no applause, just the slow, steady breath of time and the memory of all the things that mattered most. For hours, he drifts through fragments of old melodies, Chopin, Debussy, snatches of waltzes and lullabies half remembered from his youth. But something in him resists every familiar phrase. Today, none of them feel true. Today, he needs a song that has not been played before. He reaches for blank sheet music, the edges yellowed with age, and begins to write. Notes spill onto the page, hesitant, then certain. each one drawn from the ache and hope braided through all these endless winter nights. The melody is new but carries the shadows of every piece he's ever played. He calls it the final sonata. Midday, when the world is sharp and bright and utterly still, Theo carries his electric keyboard and a battered camp chair down to the willow where the bobcat rests. The wind is gone. The silence feels dense as velvet, punctuated only by the bird call and the occasional creak of shifting ice. He sets up not close. He still honors the wild's boundaries, but near enough that his presence is an offering, not an intrusion. The bobcat lifts its head, eyes narrowed, ears alert. Its breathing is shallow but even, the fight not yet fled from its bones. Theo begins to play. The first notes are soft as breath, a lullaby stitched together from all his longing and regret. He plays for Evelyn, for every empty seat in every concert hall, for all the songs he never finished, and all the goodbyes he never spoke. He plays for the wild animal, hurt and unbowed, who taught him, without words, without promise, that being heard is the only balm for loneliness. The music swells, fragile and trembling. The snow glitters. The willow branches shiver with each chord. The bobcat listens, its gaze unwavering. Theo feels something unravel in him, a knot loosening, a burden easing with each phrase. Here, beneath a winter sky that stretches into forever, he finds himself letting go, not of love or memory, but of the need for anything more than this. One heart speaking to another, one soul answering the call of a wounded world. He wonders quietly if Evelyn can hear him now. If music really does carry through whatever boundaries death sets between us. If the wild, too, has ears for sorrow. The song's final movement rises, slow and sweet, not triumphant, but gentle like a farewell. Theo's fingers falter, then find the strength to finish, the melody dissolving into silence so complete he almost expects to hear applause. But there is none. Only the hush, the weight of meaning lingering between man and beast. When the last note fades, the bobcat stands, unsteady, regal even in its weakness. It steps forward, closer than it's ever dared before, and sits at the edge of the music, its eyes half closed, its breath coming easy. For a moment, Theo feels as though time itself has stopped, as if this fragile communion is the only thing that matters. He speaks softly. This is yours. All of it. The bobcat's ears flick, but it does not look away. Its acceptance is absolute, wordless, a benediction. The moment stretches, sweet and aching. Then, as softly as it arrived, it ends. The bobcat rises, shakes itself, and slips away into the deepening blue of the evening woods. Its tracks are the only mark it leaves behind, a trail vanishing, almost at once, into the untouched snow. Theo remains there long after the animal has gone, the keyboard cooling in his lap, the air ringing with silence. He feels emptied, but not hollow, a vessel poured out, not broken. The pain is still there, but now it sits alongside a quiet gratitude, a sense that something has come full circle. Sometimes, he thinks, we wait our whole lives for an audience, for someone to hear the song we carry inside. Sometimes, the only listener we find is the one who never says a word, who asks for nothing but our truth. If you've ever felt that, a moment of pure connection, stripped of expectation or reward, you'll understand why Theo lingers in the hush, letting the silence settle, not as a prison, but as a kind of grace. As night gathers, the world turns blue and gold. The snow remembers the prints of a wild thing. The piano waits, and the photograph on the keys catches the last light of day. Theo closes his eyes, the melody echoing in his chest, and lets himself rest, not alone, not unheard, but deeply, finally, at peace. The next morning dawns gentle and bright, the winter light pouring over the lake in sheets of gold. The storm's memory lingers in the heaped snowdrifts and the broken limbs of trees, but the world has softened at the edges. In the quiet, Theo's cabin feels like a small, breathing heart against the vast, cold wilderness. Inside, the piano sits open, keys gleaming in the sun, and Evelyn's photograph stands sentinel, as if she too is waiting for the day to begin. But Theo does not play. The house, for the first time in years, is silent. No shuffle of slippers, no cough, no music threading the hours together. A chair by the window sits empty, a woolen scarf draped over its back, one of Evelyn's old touches he could never bring himself to pack away. A neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Lanford, arrives just after noon, drawn by the stillness and the sight of unshoveled steps. She calls Theo's name at the porch, waits, and calls again, her voice uncertain in the thin air. She finds the front door unlocked. The fire is out, but there is no chill of alarm, just the gentle coolness of a house left behind. She walks slowly through the rooms, her boots echoing in the hush. On the kitchen table sits a letter, folded carefully, addressed in Theo's shaky hand, for whoever comes. She reads it standing in the light, the snow reflected in her eyes. If you are reading this, then I am gone, but do not be sad for me. Last night I played my final note, and it was heard. For so long I thought I'd been left behind in a world grown too quiet, too wide. My days shrank to the crackle of fire and the creak of my own bones, my nights to the echoes of songs played for no one but the wind. I thought music needed applause, that life needed witnesses, but I was wrong. This winter a wild thing came to my door. No name, no promise, only presence. I offered it nothing but music and silence. In return, it listened. Not with words, but with the patience of something that understands loss. We shared the hush, the fear, the hope, and that was enough. I write this not as a farewell, but as a reminder. Connection does not always come in the shape we expect. Sometimes, the deepest bond is found in a single moment of being heard, of being seen, even if only by a silent witness beneath the snow-laden trees. If you have ever found comfort in art, music, or the gentle company of something unexpected, hold it close. Let it change you. Let it teach you to listen. In the end, it is not applause we seek, but understanding. Not crowds, but one soul who says, I hear you. I was never truly alone. Neither are you. Theodore Alcott. Mrs. Lanford sets the letter down, her hands trembling just a little. She walks through the house, each room bearing the hush of absence. In the living room, she stands before the piano. On the keys rests a sheet of music, handwritten, titled The Final Sonata. Notes and rests, chords and spaces, a story rendered in melody, no longer needing words. She looks out the window toward the lake. Snow sparkles where morning sun touches it. Just at the tree line, a trail of paw prints leads away, curving into the blue shadow of the woods. The wild thing has gone. No fuss, no trace but what the snow remembers. There is no drama, no tragedy here. Just a sense of things having come full circle. A song finished. A life marked not by applause but by quiet dignity and the courage to keep playing even when no one seems to listen. If you're hearing this story, if it settles in your chest and stays for a while, maybe you know what Theo felt in his last days. Maybe you too have searched for meaning in the silence. Maybe you've played your own final sonata, hoping for one soul to listen. I don't know about you, but when I picture Theo at the end, I don't see loneliness or regret. I see the open window, the wild thing listening, and the music pouring out across the snow. I see an empty chair, not as a symbol of what's missing, but as an invitation, an open space for whatever or whoever might arrive next. If you have a song inside you, let it out. Don't wait for the perfect audience. Sometimes just one witness, human or wild, past or present, is enough to give your life meaning. And if you've ever loved someone or something so fiercely that their absence aches in your bones, remember, love never leaves. It changes shape. It lingers in old photographs and half-played melodies. And sometimes, if you're very quiet, it returns, soft as breath, wild as hope. If this story touches you, I hope you'll share your own. Tell us about the art, the animal, the unexpected companion that helped you through your winter. Sometimes, it only takes a single silent witness for a soul to finish its song. The cabin is still now, but the music remains, woven into the wood, shimmering in the morning sun, echoing across the white expanse where, somewhere, a bobcat moves quietly through the trees. And in the hush, if you listen closely, you might just hear the final sonata linger, a gift, a farewell, and a promise that no one is ever truly alone.